Welcome along to this session on doing a literature review. By the end of the workshop, you'll be able to understand what a literature review is and why it's important. You'll be able to understand different types of research and consider the importance of the research question. You'll be able to recognise the process of reviewing literature and the skills needed to complete the literature review. This definition from the National Literacy Fund describes a literature review as a search and evaluation of the available literature in your given subject or chosen topic area. It's got four main objectives: surveys the literature on the topic, synthesises the information, so pulls things together into a summary, critically analyses the information gathered, so you're not just repeating the main findings, you're saying what gaps are in current knowledge, what limitations there may be, and what further research may be necessary, and presents the literature in an organised way. Reviewing the literature requires you to review the pieces of research to see what view is emerging. Do the individual researches equal a consensus conclusion, or is there controversy about the subject or topic? This is a literature review, looking at the individual research and summarising the findings. So looking at these four descriptions of what secondary research could be, there's four possible definitions. Take a quick look and hopefully you will have come to the conclusion that one of these answers is correct. I'll just give you a moment to have a little look. And hopefully you will think secondary research is reviewing data that's already been collected and analysed. So that's what we're looking at in our lit review. So we're not looking at primary data, that's stuff that can be observed, experienced or recorded. So that's things like interviews that you do with people. It's things that other people have done. So what can you review? Well, we always mention things like research papers and academic journal articles, conference papers and books, but also bear in mind research not published by commercial publishers and government reports and business reports. So just thinking about what skills you might be required to have to conduct a literature review, there are quite a number. So when I was starting to think about this, I was just thinking, oh, do you just need to look for stuff and remember it and write it down? But there's all of these things that are required, and I'll run through the process of how you would go about doing your review in a moment. So first up, set your research question. This may change, it might be malleable, it may be that you discuss it with your supervisor or look at your assignment brief, but it's very important that you set out a particular question. You would then carry out what's called scoping search, and that sort of looks at your limitations in terms of what dates you may be covering in your research, what topics you're including, what you're excluding, planning your search strategy, which keywords and search terms you're using, finding the literature, which databases you're using. Then you actually get to the point of reading your research, then evaluating the research and make notes. I'll discuss in a moment how you would make notes by using a journal template. Then critically appraise the research in terms of what limitations it may have or how they conducted this. Write your review, present the findings, proofread and evaluate, and then hand in your work. So many steps involved. So that's why it's always good to plan it and use this strategy here. So when choosing your research question, time and care must be taken with forming and refining your search and refining your question. It shouldn't be too broad or narrow, but there should be a very specific focus on your question and it should be about specific subject area, not broad, and hopefully you should be able to get an answer to your question by doing your lit review. Always agree this with your supervisor or look at your assignment brief. When I talked about how you make notes for example, if you're looking at some research that was published in an academic journal article, we've got this research template on our lit review page and within our academic skills topic areas. And this is a really good way to sort of interrogate the research that you're looking at by not simply looking at what the conclusions are, but looking at, what is most striking about the data that's presented, what the highlights, what was the objective of the study, how did they collect their data, what were the research methods. So all of those questions get you to become much more analytical in terms of evaluating the sources and presenting those findings. So after you've read the research, have a look at what do they say, you know, what are the main themes that come out, and present these findings as themes in terms of the material that you've read. And we'll talk about themes in a moment when you actually present your work in your literature review. So thinking about, you've done all this reading, how do you actually structure your literature review when you get to writing your things up? We've put these 5 things in as an example, but again, we would always say, look at your assignment brief or speak to your supervisor, but these are the way we usually structure it. Now, you may or may not need a methodology. I'll come to that in a moment. But the introduction, everyone should do. It tells the reader why this is an important subject to be investigating. It gives you context and it sets the scene. Tell the reader precisely what you're looking at and why, so make sure you're clear. The more specific you are, the easier the lit review will be to research and complete. And tell the reader exactly why you chose to investigate the thing you did. So methodology, what have you done to get the information? So you may be required to write about the databases you've used, the search terms you've used, the exclusion and inclusion criteria, and how you've selected your reading. Often this will be put in specifically with something called a systematic review. Just ensure that you check if you need to present this information within your lit review. Then you must discuss your findings, so telling your reader what you have found out and discussing those findings. So when you present them, you say what's the first point you need to make. So you might present them as little headings. And then within these headings, just think about what does the reading tell you about this first point? Does the literature say the same, or is there controversy between researchers? What does the evidence say, and what do you conclude? So in here, you'll put your comments about the research as well as what the research says. So you can repeat that for each of your points that you make. Then you come on to your conclusion and recommendations, and that's a summary or an answer to the question that you've posed within your lit review. So in a few sentences, what is the current thinking in this subject? Does it seem definite, or does more research need to be done? Then say if you've got any recommendations or not, and that depends on your investigation. And you could say the situation could still be unclear, so a recommendation could be that further research could be carried out. And finally, you need a reference list and an appendix if appropriate. It's very important to list the information, the resources and references that you've used within your work. So in summary, as I've just mentioned there, you need an intro, a methodology if required, your findings and discussions presented as points or themes, a conclusion, a reference list, and an appendix if applicable. Don't forget there are other workshops that we run for students. You can find those on our YouTube channel.